was listening to a talk from Harold Kutzvella, which is very interesting man to me. I really enjoy listening to him. His concept of reality is, I mean, as good, if not better, than anyone I've ever listened to. And the things he brings up, I've very rarely ever heard anyone else say. I don't even know where he gets his research in, and you know, I know some of the things he's into, and he does a lot of self-searching, which is amazing. But he said something that I've never heard anyone else ever say. And I've listened to, I don't want to say thousands of hours of people, but I know I've listened to at least hundreds and hundreds of hours of people that, I highly respect and I think their worldview is amazing. But he said that he was talking about Yahweh being the dualistic version of Christ, which is obvious. There's really no dispute in that. If you look into the how the Old Testament and the New Testament come together, they're complete duality of each other. God in the Old Testament is very judgmental and wrathful, and Christ in the New Testament's totally loving and as pure as anything ever is the most purest thing ever. So there's clear duality going on there. I don't think anyone can really deny. And in my opinion, it is two different versions of some entity. And again, nobody should be able to deny that too, because Christ is part of the Trinity, which would be, Christ is God, God is Christ. The Father becomes the Son becomes the Father. But the way Harold Kutzvella put it is that Christ did not die for our sins. He died for the sins of Yahweh. And that made more sense to me than anything I've heard going the opposite version, that Christ would have died for our sins. Because that never made sense to me. I understand it. I completely understand it. I think, it makes sense to me that there would have had to have been a covenant that God would keep us, pure, and a way to do that would be to to crucify Christ. But it still seems kind of odd, why 33, because you look at all the numerology and Masonic symbology of the number 33. Why couldn't Christ die at 55 or let's say 66? Couldn't they give us 22 more years of Christ? What could have Christ, was that just it? Christ was only allotted 33 years to do what he did, and we don't even know most of his 20s or teenage years or infancy. We don't know any of that. It just goes from him being born to boom, he's in his 30s already, and he's got a couple years left before he gets crucified. None of that makes any sense to me. I've read the Gospel of Thomas, and there is more to Christ's story if you want to go that route. But in the biblical version, we're missing a big chunk of time between his immaculate conception to his crucifixion. We only get a short time span of what he actually did. So why 33? Couldn't he have been allotted some more time? But it would make more sense to me, and this makes things a lot more clear to what's going on in the story of Christ, to crucify him for the sins of basically, the God of the Old Testament. Um, which again, you could say Yahweh, you could say I am, you could say Elohim, whatever you want to call it. That makes way more sense to me. And then now you can run with that, or that's a thought I can work with. Is like, okay, that would make more sense of God too, because like to blame us, blame man for fucking up so much that they had to kill the greatest entity ever to come to Earth because we messed up so bad. But again, wouldn't that be, wouldn't God have foreseen that? I understand that Lucifer or Satan, whatever entity, if they are the same entity, I don't really think so, but one of those entities could have, messed things up ridiculously to where God wouldn't foresee that. But that means it's not all knowing, and it should be all knowing. So something's amiss here. But to view it as God cleansed his own sin by sacrificing a version of himself or itself. I hate to say him when it talks to God, because and I'm not all about the non-binary stuff, even though I've spent a lot of time looking into it, and I understand how satanic and all the negative things that come with thinking things are male and female. But Elohim translates male female. I would say Yahweh translates male female. So I hate calling God him, but the indoctrination of our entire lives, God's a male. Christ, you can even say the same about Christ. We've all come to know Christ as a male, but when you look at paintings and even his demeanor, he's got a lot of feminine things going on. He looks very feminine. Da Vinci, pretty sure it's Da Vinci. Yes, it's Da Vinci. Painted Christ basically, if you looked at him nowadays, if that was Christ nowadays, he'd be pretty girly. So I don't know what Da Vinci's trying to say there. I have an idea. So Christ is very feminine with his actions, the compassion and love that Christ represents usually doesn't go with very much male qualities too. So that is what it is. I just hate calling God him. I'd say more it, or it's an entity that would be not, it wouldn't be male or female, it wouldn't be human, right? And then another thing that really, and this is not from Harold Kutzvella, this is just something I heard from a comedian, actually, and a very intelligent comedian, Norm Macdonald, and I highly suggest listening to a lot of his talks, because he's very fascinating, very well read. He's struggled with spirituality his entire life, and he knew he was dying, so I think he was really searching to some answers, and he brought up this, and it makes no sense, but the way he put it, it did make sense to think about it. Is that in the Lord's Prayer, it says, "Lead us not to temptation," which God should never ever, like, why would we ask God not to lead us to temptation? God's not supposed to ever lead us to temptation. That would be, either Satan or a Luciferic entity that would lead us to temptation. It's always Satan that tempts, not God. So I don't understand why would we ask God not to lead us to temptation? That should be a non-point. That should never ever happen. God or Christ would never lead us to temptation, as far as I've understood, you know, yeah, as far as I've understood, that's only something Satan would do, or a Luciferic entity. So those are two things that really just stuck with me when I hit it. And again, when you hear something that just like hits you in the chest, there's got to be something to it. There's got to be more truth embedded in that than something that you don't get that feeling from. So yes, Harold Kutzvela brought up a very interesting point, that Christ could have been crucified for the sins of Yahweh or God, which Christ would be God, right? And Norm Macdonald brought up a point that, why would we have that in our Lord's Prayer? Why would we put, lead us not to temptation? That's only something Satan would do. So, and again, to me, the Old Testament, even when you look at the wording of, read the first like 10 pages of the Old Testament, and I'm doing this off the whim, but I can't remember if it says Lord, and then further on in the book it says God, or vice versa. It's either God then Lord. So why would they have? Why would the writers of the Bible have to determine, or why would they put two different names to describe the same entity? Why wouldn't you just stick with Lord or God? Why would you all of a sudden just translate it differently? To me, the only thing that makes sense is if one writer had no contact with the other writer, which I do think is the case with a lot of the Bible. I don't think they were ever, on a cohesive content discussion. I think one person wrote this, another person wrote this, and they had zero contact or knowledge of each other, which I don't know if that's what biblical scholars would tell you anyways, or, I know the disciples of God translated early versions, which got to, what we got now. But to me, it sounds like they didn't even have contact with each other, or they're describing two different entities when they say God and Lord. One's something and the other one's something. That's the only thing that makes sense to me, or else why do it like that? That's very confusing. You wouldn't have a movie and put two different names to the same character without explaining why. So, just some thoughts I've had. And hopefully the 10 people that watch this can understand what I'm trying to say, or have an interesting thought to go along with it. Take care.
We did Richard Dawkins, this famous atheist.
Yeah, I know he is.
And, of course, he just thinks I'm a moron, because he went to Cambridge and I dropped out of high school. But I asked him, I said, why does life insist? And they didn't understand. What's that mean? I'm like, well, it means, I thought he was like smart. So I said, why does life,
I know what you mean,
need to create other life?
Right.
Why do you have to procreate? Why do you have to live?
and fight to stay alive.
Yeah, fight to stay alive and make sure that your genes stay alive. Why do you have to do that? Why, if nothing matters, wouldn't the obvious thing to do be go extinct?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? To me, that would be the clear and obviously self-evident thing to do. And, in fairness to Richard Dawkins, he said, oh, well, that's a philosophical question that I'll ask my friends and I'll try to get back to you. So it was very nice. But I think it lies at the heart of theology, and people of faith, especially in this town, they'll say you believe in an invisible man in the sky, and they already throw on you their
Sure.
ideas of what you believe in. Although they don't know what you believe. They don't know what you think of as God. But the one question that have always bothered me, and always bothers everybody, is how can children die if there's a benevolent God, right? And how can 6 million go through the chimney at Birkenau,
Mm-hmm.
And this is a question that I think I have an answer for, because I think a lot about this kind of stuff. Because I'd really like there to be a God. I don't know at all, but I really would like there to be a God.
Mm-hmm.
Because Sarah Silverman told me, she's like, so you really believe in it? I go, I'm trying, She's like, you believe in an invisible man in the sky? She says it that way. So I'm like, well, whatever, if you want to say it that way. So she's like, well, good luck with that. And I'm like, well, it's a good luck for you, too. It's not like your idea of like being thrown on the ground, having dirt tossed on you is such a beautiful, great idea.
That doesn't bother me.
Dirt thrown on you forever?
I mean, yeah, because I just sort of feel like it's probably just a blissful state of non-existence that I had before. Boy, I'm going to be really, it's going to be a huge bummer if that's not the case.
But if you have a blissful state of non-existence, then you're talking about an afterlife.
Well, okay, blissful is probably the wrong word. I just meant I'm not aware of anything, I think it'd be great if there was something, but if there's not, I think the worst thing would be your consciousness lives on, but there's nothing. So you just feel,
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Well, that would be hell.
I suppose.
I mean, Nabokov, I think, was the guy who said, like, he saw a picture of himself. I'm sorry, he saw a picture of his parents. And his parents had his older brother in his arm, and his mother had his older brother in her arms, and his mother and father and his older brother. But he had not been born yet. And he said he felt no grief or terror at that picture.
Sure.
Where he didn't exist.
Right.
So I thought that was very interesting, like it's what you're saying.
Right.
That why be afraid of not existing, because it's not really you that dies, it's the world that dies.
Sure.
And everything there is. Everything there is and everything...
I mean, I think it would be fantastic if there was some sort of a transformation of, this is a conservation of emotional energy that, once your emotional energy forms, it can't ever be destroyed, and it just disperses into the universe somehow, and you're a part of this thing that is, you can't comprehend now, but once you're there, you'll totally get it.
It's very hard to believe.
But it'd be great if that were
Of course it would be great.
I don't fault anyone.
But here's my answer for the
What's the answer?
For the chimneys. Here's what I believe. If there is a God, and if he is good, and if he created the universe and the earth, then an all-good being, what can he create? He can't create good, because that would just be expansion.
Mm-hmm.
So all he can create is bad. So he creates bad, and then in a cool twist, the bad that he creates is allowed itself, in a godlike way, to create good from the bad. Because originally God created good from the bad, then bad from the good, and then he gives man the exact opportunity. So just from a standpoint of logic, which, is what atheists always try to say, I believe that there is an answer for the question of why God allows horrors, and that's what I come up with. But
I also,
I have a rabbi who I talk to a lot. I'm not Jewish.
No, Macdonald's, no.
I was for a year, but he's the guy that knows. He's a scholar. Like my pastor doesn't know anything. Like he's just a pleasant guy. And he has,
I don't know. You should probably look that up.
He has
what is there? I mean, you know.
I know. If you ask him a direct question, you go, huh, what? Didn't you hear my sermon? And the sermon's always like, how to be a nice fella, or something. It's always nonsense. But this pastor, I phoned this pastor, because I try to read the scriptures and study them. Last week I asked this priest, this rabbi, I was saying, like in the Old Testament, they have the Lord's Prayer. And in the Lord's Prayer, he says, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And I said, how could God lead us into temptation? It's without his boundaries, it's without his fence. God can't do that, if I'm correct about the God of the Old Testament. He cannot. It's not in his nature. The devil can, but not God. So the devil's hard to believe in. Of all the religions, it's hard to say one's worse than the other, But I can say with all belief that there's one religion that's just not true. And that's the Church of Satan. I think it even purports to be not true. It's like, there's a guy that's bigger than me.
Well, I think some of them, I think some of the people who are, and I don't know, I can't speak for everyone, but just some of the stuff that I've seen online, I think some people adopt it as kind of a counter, like, okay, well, you guys have that guy over there with the beard, and then we have this guy.
Yeah.
And we should all be accepting it's not just that one, or just like, I think
right.
Sometimes I think it's
But
a
do
reaction.
you really want to have a personal relationship with the devil? A guy, it's the only religion where there's a bigger, stronger guy outside, of that the Satanists say exists.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But they say we're going to go with the
guy
underdog.
who was, because that guy, that guy wasn't popular. He got cast out. So we're going to be with this guy over here because
maybe that's it. Maybe he's an outlaw.
Yeah, he's kind of an outlaw. Yeah, exactly.
He's definitely the original outlaw. Look, I don't want to say too many good things about the devil. But I guess he was. Now that you say it, he was the original outlaw.
I hadn't really thought about it before, but I guess now, he was the original guy who got kicked out of the party. Who doesn't relate to that?
Exactly.
It's like big popular guys having a party. There's naked people running around. There's snakes and apples. There's a beautiful garden. It's like, you get kicked out. Come on. Everyone knows what that feels like.
It's funny, people think that whatever religion you are, Christian or whatever, that you're so self-righteous, but actually, they feel they're sinners. When I was a Christian, I would sin all the time, and I ate apples. That's on page 1 of the book. Worst possible thing you could do. And but anyways, I'm right now I'm of no faith.
But you're looking for answers.
Yeah, I'll find something. I'm probably closer to Judaism right now than anything else.